Hello and welcome to the Commander's Quarters, your Magic the Gathering source that helps you command your budget. This show and episodes like this one are possible thanks to viewers like you. If you're looking for an easy way to help support this show, make sure that you like, share, and subscribe. Also, hit that bell notification icon so you don't miss any new episodes. You can also go check out our playmats and other merchandise at thecommandersquarters.com. We also have a ton of brand new t-shirt designs in stock, so make sure you check out those as well. Another easy way to support this show is with our TCG Player affiliate links. So whether you're buying a deck or individual cards, you can use this general link right here or one in the description. And the final way that you can support this show is by supporting us directly by becoming a patron. There are many benefits to being a patron, and I truly couldn't do this without all of their support. Hey everyone, Mitch coming in for the Commander's Core Studio. Welcome to the show. So today I've got a bit of a different episode where I'm going to be talking about what just might be the meanest commander play of all time. And no, I'm not talking about land destruction or stacks. I'm talking about something entirely different, which is utilizing a card that, well, we'll get into it. But before we do, please, in the comments below right now, make sure you hashtag blame Eddie, because the reason that this play and this episode exists is pretty much Eddie's fault. But to explain why, let's talk about the card that this entire play is built around. Aeon Engine came out back in Commander 2019, and this very well might be the weirdest card in Commander, or actually in any Eternal format. The fact that this card is legal and that it's not silver border is always kind of baffling to me. There are certain rules that are only really ever broken in unsets, and this one basically breaks a rule that I thought was pretty much unbreakable in Eternal formats. For those of you that don't know, it's an artifact that costs 5, it enters the battlefield tapped, and you can tap and exile it to reverse the game's turn order. For example, if play had proceeded clockwise around the table, it now goes counterclockwise. Yeah, switching around turn order isn't really something that I ever thought was possible in a game of Commander, much less, Legacy, which I think would be pretty funny. I highly doubt that would ever see play there because that doesn't really make sense to see play there. But yeah, that actual Eternal formats would ever have access to a card that could actually do this. Now, this very strange and off-the-wall card does not see a lot of play in Commander. In fact, it's only in like 700 or so decks, 0% of total decks that it could be in. Again, this is a card that can go in any deck because it has no color identity. So yeah, it sees play in very few decks. And probably for good reason. I mean, there's not a lot of decks that are really looking for this kind of effect. Now, that being said, the reason that this entire episode exists and the reason this card came up was because I was playing this card in a deck, I believe it was my rarity deck with Eddie, and we talked about, hey, this card is kind of strange, and there's gotta be a way to abuse this, right? And of course, hashtag blame Eddie had found just the way to do that. Now, I'm not saying it was abused in that game, but it has been theorized exactly how it could be abused, and, in my opinion, how it could potentially be the meanest play in Commander history if you were able to pull this off. Now, the way that Aeon Engine was designed, it does have some stopgaps that essentially prevent it from being abused, in certain ways. First up, it does enter the battlefield tapped, so you can't just, activate it right away or before your next turn. You've got to untap with it. Now, obviously, yes, there are ways to actually untap this, but still, there's one kind of stopgap there. And the second stopgap is that you're not sacrificing this to actually get the effect, you are tapping and exiling it. So, no recurring from your graveyard to do this over and over again. Now, with this though, there is one spot that I'm not sure if it was an oversight or if Wizards was just like, hey, no one's gonna play this anyways, so why not make it legendary? That's right, although Aeon Engine is an incredibly unique card, it is not legendary, which of course means that we can copy it with something like Mechanized Production. Mechanized Production is an aura that costs 2 blue, and it says enchant artifact you control. At the beginning of your upkeep, create a token that's a copy of enchanted artifact. Then if you control 8 or more artifacts with the same name as one another, you win the game. Now, although it is a, nice little addition that if we control 8 or more other artifacts with the same name as one another, we win the game, Cool, that's not what we're going for here, and that's not how we have what is potentially, again, the meanest play in Commander. Because, again, Aeon Engine isn't legendary, so again, we can make copies of this, and if we play our cards right, well, we can essentially make it so that the player sitting diagonally from us never gets another turn. Now, I'm not saying we're taking that player out, we are just making it so that they never actually get to take another turn. Oh, and just another small thing to note, we're going to be getting twice as many turns as the other two players. Again, that would be the player sitting on our left and on our right. So, diagonal player doesn't get to play anymore at all, and the other players get half as many turns as we do. Essentially, the entire thing is pretty simple, and again, all you need are these two cards, and essentially them to stick on the table. You get Aeon Engine into play, and you put Mechanized Production on it. And then at the beginning of your upkeep, you get a token of Aeon Engine. That token's going to enter the battlefield tapped, and that's okay, because again, we get to untap our original Aeon Engine. Then when it's the next player's turn, again, we're going to be playing clockwise to start. The player on our left, during their turn, we just tap and exile the original Aeon Engine to reverse the game's turn order. That player takes their turn, it goes back to us, we get another upkeep. Or should I say we get an untap and an upkeep, because again, we get to untap that Aeon Engine token that we made the previous turn, and then we get to make another Aeon Engine token, thanks to Mechanized Production, which comes into play tapped. Then, since we're going counterclockwise, the player on our right will have their turn, and on their turn, we're going to tap and exile that copy of Aeon Engine to reverse the game's order again. So when that player's turn is over, it's our turn again. We get to untap our Aeon Engine token, make another token that comes into play tapped, and you see where this is going. The game turn order is going to keep switching. We're going to keep swinging back and forth between the left player to us, to the right player to us, to the left player to us, and the player that is diagonal from us doesn't get to play anymore. And again, like I mentioned before, keep in mind we are getting twice as many turns as the other two players. Doesn't that sound like fun? Okay, well, for us. Certainly not for the player diagonal from us, and still, again, not for the players that we're getting twice as many turns of. And it's not like we're targeting that diagonal player, that's just the only way that this can work for us to get twice as many turns as the other players. Regardless, again, I'm not sure if it was an oversight or not to put Legendary on Aeon Engine, but because it's not Legendary, you can do fun things like this. And again, of course, make sure you blame Eddie for all of this. Regardless, of course, there are actually ways to make this even more brutal for, well, another player. So now let's move on and talk about cards like Copy Enchantment, Mirror Maid, and Estrid's Invocation. Because while we've got our very fun Aeon Engine Mechanized Production thingy going on, well, let's just make it a bit more one-sided with these cards in combination with Mechanized Production. Each of these are essentially enchantments that can enter the battlefield as a copy of another enchantment. So we'll have them enter as a copy of Mechanized Production, which will have them become an aura, which is going to attach to, well, you guessed it, Aeon Engine. So then on each of our upkeeps, we're going to be getting 2 token copies of Aeon Engine, and this is where things again get a little more mean. Because now instead of actually having to, swing back and forth from the left player to us, to the right player to us, the left player, etc., 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 we can cut another one of those players out. Because we're going to be getting 2 token copies of Aeon Engine on our upkeep, again, that's just 1 upkeep for 2 tokens, we can reverse the game's order twice and make it so that, again, one of our players on our left or our right doesn't get to play as well, so they can join diagonal player who's never gotten to play with this. Essentially, with enough Aeon Engines and with enough in play untapped to start, well, we can just keep it between either, say, us and the left player or us and the right player and just cut out the other player from actually playing the game. Now, unfortunately, this does mean that we're going to get the exact same number of turns as that other lucky player. Oh darn. But still, quite mean. It's not technically a game of solitaire, it's just more of a game of one-on-one while the other 2 players watch, and can't really do anything. Now, of course, we also have other cards that can help out with Mechanized Production, like, Doubling Season, or Primal Vigor, or Annoyed Procession. Essentially, they just give us an extra token whenever we make a token. Again, at a certain point, it's overkill to have essentially too many Aeon Engines in play, but there really aren't, there isn't such a thing as too many of them. You can just keep using them. So you can also use Paradox Haze and Sphinx of the Second Sun in combination with Mechanized Production as well to give you even more tokens. Each of these essentially just give you an extra upkeep, so yeah, that's basically all you need to get that upkeep trigger again. And actually, okay, I probably should have mentioned this, maybe that is kind of a nice way that you can end the game if you decide to keep your Aeon Engines in play, and then you just win with Mechanized Production's trigger. Or, you can just keep activating and exiling them unnecessarily just to stay underneath that amount to annoy your friends. and lose them probably. And of course, even Brutaclad can help you annoy your friends with this, and it actually might be a decent commander to pick for this kind of a strategy because it can help you make an extra copy. It has at the beginning of combat on your turn, create a 2/1 blue mirror artifact creature token. Then you may choose a token you control. If you do, each other token you control becomes a copy of that token. So again, just basically, you just need one token copy of Aeon Engine, and then you can make all of your tokens into Aeon Engine, and you can have fun from there. Now, another way that you might be able to go about this outside of utilizing mechanized production might be with things like Sidri, March of the Machines, and Soul Artifact. Sidri is a fantastic commander and one that can actually make non-creature artifacts into artifact creatures. And March of the Machines actually does that for all of your artifacts, and Soul Artifact does it for one artifact that it's enchanting. Essentially, there are just a lot more ways for the most part to use and abuse a permanent when it is a creature. So say that you've got something like March of the Machines in play, and you've also got Aeon Engine in play. Now you can utilize something like Followed Footsteps to make more copies of it, or, Progenitor Mimic, or Mirror Mimic. Okay, or should I say the other side? Because on the other side, we've got Ghastly Mimicry, which says at the beginning of your upkeep, create a token that's a copy of enchanted creature, except it's a Spirit Distiller types. And essentially, again, Progenitor Mimic and Followed Footsteps basically do the same thing. The main thing, again, to remember here is turn Aeon Engine into a creature, copy it more, have fun, and don't let Diagonal Player play. Now, if you want to get really nasty, what you could potentially do is have a very control-y deck that is just very good at keeping this going and, keeping your opponents down, especially since, again, can have, 2 times as many turns essentially as your other 2 opponents, and then one other player is essentially locked out. Well, you could just keep things going for an absurdly long time if you're a terrible person, with things like Mnemonic Nexus, Temporal Cascade, and Days Undoing. Each of these essentially are going to make each player shuffle their graveyard into their library, and if you've got 2 of them, well, you can never mill yourself out, and neither can your opponents. So even though those other players are taking turns in drawing cards, well, they've got either play cards or discard cards, so you can just keep getting their cards back into the library so they can keep playing with you. Even though you're playing twice as much as they are, and that other player's not playing at all. Now, at the end of the day, is this potentially meanest play of all time all that realistic? There's a lot of moving pieces to it. It's also quite fragile. Now, I'm not saying you couldn't build a deck entirely around this, where your whole goal was literally just to get this going so that you can, shut out Diagonal Player and, have twice as many turns as the other 2 players, or, just take turns with one other player and not have the other 2 players play at all. It is possible. It definitely is. That being said, before you build a deck around this, you need to ask yourself 2 questions. First up, do I think I can pull this off? Secondly, do I actually want to pull this off? Because again, if you do, you are most definitely going to be getting the ire of at least one player. Again, poor Diagonal Player, not getting to play at all. But again, at the end of the day, we can all agree on one thing. #blame Eddie. And with that, this show is coming to a close, so it's my turn to hear from you. So in the comments below, let me know what your thoughts on this episode are, and as always, thanks again and have a good one.